Just the basics. What exactly does that actually mean? Stick around, I'll explain over time. After grabbing our Explorer's Permit and then our Hard Mode medal, we embark on our journey to Snakemouth Den. On the way there, let's talk about the rules of this challenge. In just the basics, you can only use your basic attack. That's it. Veterans of Bug Fables know that if you don't use TP, you're going to take a lot of damage. With the lack of any increases to your attack power stat, it is very common that after a battle, you will not come out unscathed. So not being able to use moves like Taunt or Tornado Toss will make things a lot harder for us. Yeah, not only are attack skills banned, but also support skills, like Secret Stash. A consequence of this can be seen very plainly in the fight with Spooter. With Leaf's Icefall skill being locked away, V is the only bug that can target foes that are airborne. And likewise later in the game, Kabu's Understrike as well as V's Hurricane Toss are locked away as well. So the only bug that can target characters that are on the ground is Leaf with his basic attack. And with Hurricane Toss banned, the only bug that can flip enemies over is Kabu with his basic attack. Yeah, our kit is pretty bare bones, but it doesn't quite end there. Naturally, Spooter still is not very difficult. In fact, I did this fight completely itemless. But there is more to this run than in Chapter 1. You see, I tried to read all of my comments, and I got at least 2 that told me that this challenge on its own would not be very interesting. One person to comment, Kabale Commentier, said they completed a no TP run, and it was one of their easiest challenges. And Pichu Perez basically said it was essentially Pebble Toss only minus the TP and burrowing enemy concerns. Now, in my endeavor to win your subscription because I want 1,000 subscribers, I decided to make this challenge more interesting. So guess what? We're banning any and all recipes. Now for clarification's sake, if there are items that are recipe items you can buy from shops, those are fine. But we can't cook items. So fry, crispy, and cut are all off limits. That being said, we have to talk to Fry to continue through Chapter 2, and we can't cook anything. Which means that Leaf is about to starve to death. Well, this is certainly unfortunate. The sad thing is, this is counted in my recipe log. Amidst my metal hunting as well as crystal berry scavenging, we fight the Wasp Trooper in a very straightforward fight. Though because I can't cook recipes, that means I can't get Pebble Toss. Which for this fight is really only the difference between 3 turns and 4 turns. In other words, not a very big deal. With Neolev rescued and being escorted by Team Celia, we in our own time make it to Golden Settlement. But not before doing this gauntlet for the Golden Settlement technician so he could fix the cable car. Which, I have to be honest with you, I did this gauntlet, got the berry reward, and left without getting Super Block Plus. Which is the entire point of me doing this quest. And I don't even realize I forgot to get this medal until after Chapter 2 is finished with and I beat Monsieur Scarlet. Like I said in my last challenge, I'm not good at thinking. And to think, I'm only 25 years old. But I had the memory of a dead kangaroo riding in the desert. Anyway, we're fighting Arya now. Since Icefall is banned, we're back to using V again here. After all, she can target Arya directly without having to target the grass first. Also, despite the fact that she lacks Leaf's elemental advantage, she does a much better job dealing with Venus Buds. I was planning on having her do most of the damage to Arya too, but she really wanted to increase her defense a ton in this fight. As such, it just made more sense to use Kabu's attack here because he ignores defense. This fight was about as straightforward as they come, which, given how straightforward our battle plan is appreciated. Then we fight, the ugliest baby I've ever seen in my life.
Dirty hoe!
Anyway, she wanted to hijack our mission so we had to beat her up. Not being able to do a lot of damage in very little time hurts a lot for the fight with Zasp and Moptava. And you likely know why. Because Zasp can charge himself up when Moptava gets hurt, this ends up being a fight you want to finish quickly, but you really can't. What I ended up doing in this fight was ganging up on Moptava up until she became like within an inch of her life. Then I focused my efforts on Zasp. Before too long, Zasp was only 1 hit away from being knocked out, Moptava being 2 hits away, and the reason why I did this is, well, let's just chalk it up to curiosity. I wanted to see if Zasp could have both a +1 charge and a permanent +1 attack bonus from Moptava getting knocked out, and as it turns out, he can. Now, he didn't get to use it, but it was good to know at least. Up ahead and waiting to be wilted was Venus Guardian. Somehow I got past this fight without using items. Fun fact, when I played this game blind, this was where I get my first death. It's really crazy to think that now I have a simple game plan of just constantly using either Kabu or Leaf early in the fight, using V when it's airborne, and then just finishing it off with no Venus but to help it. It's kinda sad, but at the same time, I guess I just got that much better at this game. Now for the fight that really shows how hard this run can really be. Monsieur Scarlet. This fight started off pretty easy actually, but that's only because Monsieur Scarlet was perfectly content just spamming the Crescent Beam, which doesn't heal him at all. Then he started playing dirty, and then we had a problem. The problem is we can't do very much damage to Monsieur Scarlet without him immediately healing it back. And knowing exactly how much he does heal makes this very complicated. It doesn't help that he has a penchant for lowering your attack power so you do even less damage to him. And targeting Kabu with that is especially bad because he can increase his defense at will too. At a certain point, I was really wondering what I could even have done to have won this fight, but I had a spicy berry in my bag. And as it turns out, it's exactly what the doctor ordered. It did not take long to realize I would not be breaking through. So the turn after Monsieur Scarlet used his blast attack, I popped the spicy berry into Kabu and got to work cutting him down to size. Now here's the funny thing. Monsieur Scarlet, after I used the spicy berry, tried to lower Kabu's attack again. But here's the thing about Bug Fables. Its coding is really weird. When your attack power is dropped but it's also increased by an item, the attack up status takes priority. So even with +1 and -1 attack making you think it'd be neutral attack power, it still does +1, and we're still going to beat Monsieur Scarlet this turn. And to think, my original plan for this fight involved Super Block Plus. After doing some shopping in the Underground Tavern, I went to the Lost Sands. Not much to really do here, just wind up some bandits and a Wasp Scout, so we'll just mop them up real quick. Though still, it did take a while, and man, I really miss being able to spam Frigid Coffin right now. Listen folks, you never know what you have until it's gone, so value every wicked moment you have your heavy strikes and tornado tosses. Now chapter 3 is famous for one location in particular, the Honey Factory. Once you step foot in this place, you're trapped until after you beat B33. Now, normally, you want to make sure you come in the Honey Factory with as many items and medals as possible. Not only that, but make sure your items are really strong. But here's the funny thing. Items outside the Honey Factory are actually really weak. Inside the Honey Factory, however, gives us access to one of the best items in the game for this challenge, leaf omelets. We can't cook these, but because we can buy them already cooked, they're illegal for our challenge run. So yeah, outside of medals, this is one of the very few times in this game where being trapped in the Honey Factory isn't a bad thing. So how about them bosses? Well, first is the Honey Nation. Remember that neckbeard woman child Moptava? So get this, she took her babysitter down to the basement to satisfy what I can only imagine her dream of being a Lifetime movie protagonist. That's right, you heard it here first, humans of all identities. Moptava is indeed the girl in the basement! Anyway, a Honey Nation, what's there to be said? Well, this fight did come the closest to knocking me out so far. Between the high damage and threat of Obama Honey summons, I actually had to use items to survive in this fight. However, I also needed another trick up my sleeve. In this case, poison metals. I guess I should ask, should I actually ban turn relays in a future challenge run? I won't do it here because I need all the damage I can get, but it does need to be said. The damage the player loses out from not being able to use skills can be made up for somewhat thanks to turn relays and status medals like Poison Attacker. There's also Power Exchange, Last Attack, as well as one more medal that would be really worth looking into later on in Chapter 4. But first, we've got a super fighting robot to deal with. Now, soon after the fight with B33 started, I started dreading this fight. Why is that? Because B33 specializes in the area of effect attacks. Attacks that hurt your entire party for decent damage. Now, I do have good defenses, so they didn't hurt me that much, but this is also before B33 gets his attack increased. Safe to say, I needed a plan. It just so happened that my plan also involved using poison metals. The long and short of it is you want the second phase to last for as little time as possible, so giving V, my star attacker, Poison Attacker, really only made sense. And if it wasn't V attacking, it'd be Kabu, because when Kabu attacks an enemy with natural defense, it's not so much that the defense is ignored, it's that Kabu does 1 extra damage point to them. So instead of only doing 2 damage because he has only 2 attack, he does 3, because the game thinks that he's doing damage against an enemy with defense, even though in reality, he isn't. It's a pretty handy mechanic to exploit, wouldn't you say so? But yeah, that ends Chapter 3. This is where things get interesting, Chapter 4. So the first thing I wanted to do was fight Mother Chomper. I was really hoping I could get some mileage out of using Berserker, but as it turns out, it didn't work. My original plan was to use Berserker Leaf with Leaf in the back, and give him enough defense that even if he was put to sleep, he'd be able to survive even despite Mother Chomper's multiple attacks and higher attack power. But it doesn't really work when she uses Hard Seize without putting you to sleep first. It was also really awkward trying to plan around her bite, which I really could not do with all 3 bugs standing. I tried using Berserker a couple of times, but it just never worked, and yeah, that's 2 deaths to Mother Chomper. So yeah, this plan was a total bust. You just can't beat Poison Attacker, man. You just can't. Though in hindsight, I wish I went back for Antlion Jaws now. Without Berserker though, this fight was really slow, but I also just had really bad luck here. Oftentimes, I try to save my Leaf Omelets for when I really needed them, but Mother Chopper just has this knack for finding these surgically good times to try and knock Kabu out. Whereas like, he has too much HP where it's be worth using a Leaf Omelet, but low enough HP where he's actually vulnerable to being KO'd. It really caused me a lot of trouble, more than I care to admit. But with enough perseverance, this fight wasn't too bad. Reality is, even on hard mode, this game isn't really that hard for me, but I would be remiss if I didn't at least try to give some kind of creativity for you, the viewer, to snack on. Otherwise, let's be real, I am not the most entertaining person out there. I'm just a humble man who wants to share his love for Bot Fables with you. Still, I was determined to make Berserker work in at least one fight. My next target, Broodmother. And so it kinda worked a bit better here, but not really. Once again, Leaf had Berserker, and he was doing a lot of damage too. But of course, he gets ganged up on for one turn, I don't have Miracle Matter yet, and I have no Magic Seeds. Let's just say it's curtains for him. And to be honest, I didn't really need Berserker here anyway. Both Kabu and V had enough defense whereas they were not really in any real danger. And slowly but surely, Broodmother went down, and then so did her midges. Well, what can I say? Can't blame the guy for trying. Well, that was disappointing. I guess we'll just fight a Softliest the safe way instead. I just have to say, by the way, it feels so good getting to use Spiky Bot and Super Block Plus together on Kabu. Though in reality, this fight wasn't too bad to use Berserker on, even though we can know its viability mainly to back support. But yeah, it worked well enough here, so I thought, let's try for doing Scorpion too. Success was limited. We were dishing out good damage, but the problem then became when V got targeted specifically, and not being able to block hurt a lot. Also, in general, I was just not very good about super blocking this boulder toss. Though as fate would have it, the very last boulder that was tossed, I did manage to super block. Now, I'm not too sure how much it really mattered because Leaf still had plenty of HP left, but odds are if I missed, I probably would not be able to survive. Nonetheless, I find it rather interesting that the chapter bosses haven't given me very much trouble. Now the optional bosses though, that's where things get fun. Next target and first bounty, Devourer. Safe to say, Berserker here would not work. I don't even try. Instead, I put a very heavy focus on one bug doing a bunch of damage with the other two falling not too long after. Poison Metals are also just really handy here because I don't have a lot of money, and so once again, yes, I did use Weak Stomach, but can you blame me? It's just a really handy metal to have. Now, I did lose one attempt. I guess my head just wasn't all there because I completely missed the block with the head slam, and it just so happened to do Leaf in. The second attempt though, nothing really bad happened. I mean, yeah, it took a long time to finish the fight, but that's what you can expect from this challenge. But yeah, this bounty was no big deal. Tidal Worm, however, was a problem. Depressingly enough, the first attempt was the best I got, but that was largely because Tidal Worm was for the longest time not summoning any allies for itself. What I wanted to do was have a bug with Berserker in the front and just keep doing damage to Tidal Worm, because that's the most damage I can get in this fight. But the occasional meat shields that are summoned, as well as just how much damage I'm taking, not to mention limited items, it did not lend itself well to success. Also, yes, I had Princess in the party with me as well, but I'm not really sure to count ribbons or not in this challenge's rule set. I mean, technically it's not a skill, but it is something that she can equip. And there are ribbons that use TP, which is strictly banned, so just to be safe, I'm not gonna allow myself to use the ribbons for Chompy. She's as basic as the rest of us. But yeah, I couldn't beat Tidal Worm. We'll just have to come back to this fight later. Instead, let's go to the Lost Sandcastle, and here I have a bit of a confession to make. The 3 Wardens you're forced to fight before the Watcher did end up knocking me out once. How did that happen? Because V got numbed, and I didn't have Miracle Matter on her, and she's the only bug I have that can target airborne foes. Yeah, big mistake. I wasn't recording at the time, but I figured I'd mention it here just so you know. After all, somebody has to keep track of my blunders, right? It may as well be me. Out goes the Warden, in comes the Watcher, and this fight was actually pretty fun. I was able to do a pretty good job at keeping my HP at a pretty manageable level the entire fight. V's my main attacker with Kabu relaying his turns to her, but if ever the Watcher increases his defense or ends up getting Leaf to low HP, V can pass the baton to him and have him attack instead. Both Leaf and V can avoid dealing with barriers, and Leaf can even force the Watcher from underground, so very rarely were we ever actually prevented from doing any damage to the Watcher. Yet another one and done victory, brought to you by Phantom A. Not gonna lie, Chapter 4 had a few rough patches. Getting bugged by the Wasp King didn't help us either. And speaking of the Wasp King, yeah, Chapter 7, that is gonna be an adventure in and of itself. But while we're in Chapter 5, we of course know this chapter is very short, but that won't stop me from spending a lot of time here. While in the far grasslands, I scavenged some crystal berries, but after we got to the wild swamplands, I went to get myself a metal called Internal Venom. this medal will be fantastic. Now, I'm certain that some of you are already well aware of the potential of poison. Give a bug Poison Attacker, Eternal Venom, Reverse Toxin, Poison Defender, Poison Touch. You've got yourself a natural born Exodia. Now, on that note, it's a shame you can only run one poison bug. But what if I told you you can run 2 poison bugs? Enter Status Relay, and I'm going to talk about this medal while we fight Tidal Worm. So did you know that if you poison a bug with Eternal Venom, and you use Status Relay to relay that poison to another bug, their poison duration will also be infinite. This means that in practice, and theoretically speaking, you have not 1, but 2 Eternal Venom medals, potentially even 3 if you really wanted to. For the fight with Tidal Worm, I had Kabu on defense and Leaf on offense. When V gets damaged, I'll have her heal herself with an item to get poisoned. On that very same turn, I will have another bug relay their turn to V, and have her relay that turn back at the bug who gave her the turn initially. Doing this, you can very easily have as many bugs poisoned as you want forever if you really wanted to. And this strategy put in fantastic work against Tidal Worm. Being limited to only our basic attacks, we can't really focus on the tail, because that would take an entire turn from any of our bugs to fight. And Tidal Worm not only hits hard, but loves to use its AoE attack on us as well. It also has a lot of HP, so you can only imagine just how hard this fight really is. But with Leaf always on the offense and having a lot of attack to boot, and Kabu being generally unstoppable, we were actually able to stand up to Tidal Worm. Now, as for why Leaf is my main attacker, it's really quite simple. Either Leaf or V would have been fine for this fight, just not Kabu because of the summons. Before too long, we got this fight done, though admittedly, it did take a while. To say nothing of all the Leaf omelets I had to use up here too. Then there was the Seedling King, which I used the same strategy basically for this fight as well. I actually panicked and choked near the beginning of this fight, and V got knocked out really early on. However, unlike the waters in the sandcastle, I did think ahead for this. V has Miracle Matter, so all we have to do right now is just survive until she comes back up. And once she does, I then resort to having her heal herself to get poisoned, and then getting Kabu on the defensive. You may have also noticed this, but I'm using Poison Touch in this fight. This is basically just to get a little extra chip damage on the Seedling King and his allies. It also helped a bit for Tidal Worm too. And yes, it was appreciated. That fight took a long time, I needed as much help as I could get. Anyway, this fight was actually easier than Tidal Worm, but that was largely because A, Leaf has an elemental advantage, and B, Seedling King summons are also weak to ice, and they're not nearly as sturdy either as, say, Jumping Spiders or Water Striders. All around, Leaf put in an incredible amount of work for this fight. Also, as it turns out, miracles do happen, because yes, Princess does get a KO for once in this challenge. Way to freaking go! There wasn't really that much left to do in Chapter 5, just a few miscellaneous bosses like Sen and PC, though this fight was pretty down to the wire. A big reason why is because Sen kept healing PC, and as a result, I had to use a Leaf Omelet. Yeah, if I had to be brutally honest with you, the only real consequence was I had to use an item to heal myself just one time, which is still more than I can say for Kali and Kabu. The only thing really worth saying about this fight was that my Berserker bug got a lot of attacks in. That and using Berserker generally means that being taunted really isn't a problem for me. Which, funny enough, you can say about Riz too. Yeah, Riz does do a lot of damage, but Frostbite go brrr, it's so cold. I mean this when I say this, Riz is one of the very few fights that almost doesn't change whatsoever. In fact, we can just assume we're permanently inked the entire fight. Nothing else to say about him, really straightforward. I mean when you get around the loop-de-loops and pulls, yeah, this guy's a total trip. About all that's left now for optional bosses is Zamoth. Once again, it's V who's my star attacker for this fight. You could argue that Leaf would be better because of the elemental advantage he has, but as it turns out, it wasted absolutely no time attacking Leaf with its Blight magic. So yeah, my strategy is 100% Zamoth approved. The damage we deal isn't necessarily the best, but it's still pretty good damage. Which almost makes up for the damage I had to lose out on because of the Zombeetle being summoned. Oh god. Imagine if we see one of those in the fight with Zamoth with only Pebble Toss. Also, yeah, this is not Pebble Toss only, I didn't have time to stream that challenge in a while. And given the recent speed of my channel growth, I sincerely hope I can get around to that video before I reach 1,000 subscribers. Because I started that challenge when I had 500 subscribers, and it'd otherwise be really embarrassing. Anyway, I get this is really traumatic for Leaf, who's really struggling with the idea that he's really not even Leaf anymore. But the poor guy is just really tired. I decided instead to have just be both V and Kabu taking care of this fight. You know, who cares about keeping to a theme? Oh yeah, also, whenever Zamoth charges, Princess can't do anything. Well, that sucks. On the other hand, Miracle Matter is just really handy right now. V could just have fainted, We get the chest laser thrown at us, and then V bounces back like nothing happened, which funny enough allowed Kabu to relay to V, and she barely can't KO Zomboff with her turns. However, Princess can, which honestly is just so much better. It's like getting a pawn checkmate in chess. And like that, that's all the bosses before Chapter 5 can be finished. Yes, there is Carmina, but I can't fight her with the challenge rules as is. So let's just go and fight the beast. Well, that was a stupid decision. Anyway, the beast. I have put absolutely zero thought into this fight. I gave Kabu a bunch of medals and had him keep attacking. That's literally all I did. And sad to say, it worked just fine. With how much damage I was doing and the effects of poison status on me too, it's difficult to say we were in any real danger. It can be said though because, well, when Leaf got knocked out and the beast went underground, we couldn't really touch it. That aside, this boss was a piece of cake. I honestly can't say anything else for this boss. The Wasp Kingdom wasn't much worse either, though I do have to say, it made grinding a heck of a lot easier. Now, I would ask if you could believe that I still get 15 exploration points from each enemy here, but you can see that for yourself. And General Ultimax wasn't much worse either. There were times we'd fall short in KOs, but we were never in any real danger either. Kabu having Berserker really isn't a big problem, when the most I really needed him for was just fainting the Driller. Aside from that, V did suffer a KO, but that was about all that really happened that was bad for us. And that covers Chapter 5. Normally a short chapter, but man am I good at stretching. Though on the bright side, we'll have less to do in the post-game. Now that we're in Chapter 6, I figured the best thing to do is to get some extra medals. I could've gotten a reflection earlier, but I figured I didn't really need it at the time. So I waited until now to get some extra berries too from Eremi. Some more miscellaneous stuff was also gathered, but they were not really as important as reflection medals. With not much else to do, we fought Primo Weevil afterwards. This fight was almost primarily just having Kabu use his basic attack, at least until he got knocked out because I just did not feel like healing him. After he went down, I just let V do the same thing, and her damage plus Poison Touch did allow us to barely squeak by with a victory. And might I add, an additional KO for Princess. With all of those bosses behind us, we now have access to the item Mega Rush, trademarked. Before now, the only way to trigger poison status with weak stomach involved only items that would immediately restore HP or TP. But now, we can do that by increasing attack power for a couple of turns. And it's this very same item that will make the Colosseum just so much more fast for us. I can actually KO the Mimic Spider in a single turn with only Leaf attacking. And the Plumpling is a one-shot. The same couldn't be said for Cross and Poi. In fact, they did quite a bit of damage to V as well, so they weren't necessarily harmless either. But A, we have plenty of items, and B, he was still child's play. Speaking of child's play, Mothba's coming to invade our fighting sessions. Now, I can't freeze or incapacitate Zasp in any way without using items. But right now, I don't really need to. The first thing I do is slam Zasp like there's no tomorrow. Then when he's about to get knocked out, I start hammering on Mothba, and then once he gets really irate because of his Simp mode being activated, I let Princess get her fill of raw wasp meat. Yeah, she would revive him, but it really did not mean anything at all. Leaf would attack him 2 more times, then Mothba to get his Simp mode activated, and Princess once again finishes him off. Now, I deliberately chose not to block this attack because I was curious. Would Mothba stop in the Colosseum fight, get her poison with Poison Touch being on Leaf? As it turns out, only the Kick gets her poison, but the 3 stomps afterwards don't count, which is really freaking lame. But to help make up for that, Princess got 1 more KO. The Colosseum is now behind us, but there's a couple more medals I want to get before the end of the game. And those couple of medals are a couple of HP cores. I want these 2 medals because of the bounty fights you have to do afterwards. First was False Monarch. Once again, I'm using the strategy of double Eternal Venom. First with poisoning Kabu who's in the front, then relaying everything to Leaf so he can start slamming. Yeah, I forgot about Status Relay. Guess it's a really good thing this medal only costs 1 MP, huh? Anyway, Kabu's by Stone Wall, and he's in front. All he has to do is do nothing every turn. The reason for this is because being in the front means that he'll be targeted the most by the False Monarch's attacks. Meanwhile, Leaf is in the back, and he's also being supported by poison attackers, and his damage output is still above average because he has poison attackers active. Lastly, V is in the middle, and she just relays her turns to Leaf at any chance she can get. If she's not doing that, she's healing. She also has both Miracle Matter and Block Heal, so good execution should keep her alive just fine. This strategy worked exceptionally well for False Monarch. Now, he can stall if he chooses to keep summoning Mothflies to heal himself, and the Swarm is really hard to super block as well, so V does get knocked out quite a few times. But overall, my level of endurance is just far greater than False Monarch's. And it shows because False Monarch got succeeded by Princess. And now for the last bounty boss, the Peacock Spider. We did less damage on the count of Peacock Spider having defense. Otherwise, this fight was incredibly easy for me. It really helped that after we finished the False Monarch off, we got Last Sand. Which, because Leaf is constantly taking damage because we only have one reverse toxin medal and that's on Kabu, that plus our 2 HP cores on Leaf make him borderline unkillable. Meanwhile, V is literally unkillable. Have I mentioned yet that I love block heal? V knew it was her time to burn, but she invoked the ancient power of the Axolotl that she may return. And just like that, all the optional bosses sans Carmina are all dealt with. Pretty dang nice if I may say so myself. And now to wrap this all up, one more fight with the Ultimax tank and General Ultimax himself. Once again, just like with the Beast, I have all my medals in Kabu and I'm just gonna have him go to town. It for the most part went pretty well, up until I missed a block with an ice bomb and it got frozen. I mean, I didn't lose, far from it, but it did hurt to see V get knocked out. But that's really it. This fight was otherwise not special. Ultimax, go home. Just go home. But this in fact does end Chapter 6. The end is near as Chapter 7 is here. And the first real fight here, the Deadlander ambush, was, well, if I'm to be brutally honest, it was a very close fight. Like, no joke, I actually almost lost. Once again, I'm using double poison strats. And while it was effective, it only barely saved me. Major problem is the Deadlander Gamma. It has this multi-hitting attack that shoots 4 spores that puts you to sleep. And because the damage is really freaking high, it does mean I'm vulnerable, as having a lot of HP really can't save me when I can't act at all. It's a really good thing I stocked up on magic seeds from the Wasp Kingdom. If not for these, there would be absolutely zero chance I would have survived this first attempt. Even then, there were some very close shaves. It's quite tough to say which was the closest call, but I'd have to say it was the final turn where I could attack or do anything at all. I only had 6 HP left, and Kabu got put to sleep. The very next hit knocked V out because it missed the block so I couldn't block any further, and from there I was a sitting duck. Kabu was asleep, Princess can't do any damage. My only option was just to wait and pray to Venus and Maki would save us. And being unable to block or wake up, you can tell we were banging on heaven's door at this fight. If this fight lasted just one more turn, we'd have lost guaranteed. That was close. My prayers were answered though, and we are ready to continue on. However, it was this moment where my life was flashing before my eyes that made me really slow down and take the time to appreciate my own family. So after this near-death experience, I went ahead and had V reconcile with her sister. And on the way to doing this, I went ahead and got Leaf to see his family just one last time, just in case we don't make it back. It's better we did this so we have no more regrets. But now, there's no reason to turn back. Let's get that nasty Wasp King. Once again, double Eternal Venom is extremely useful here. Leaf does damage, Kabu stone walls, and V supports. However, I chose Leaf for a very particular reason, and that reason is just because of the second phase, the Everlasting King. You likely already know this, but the Everlasting King is weak to ice. If not for that, then yeah, I choose V to be my attacker instead. Even so, the Everlasting King can fly, so if V gets knocked out without Miracle Matter, well, we'd be in a lot of trouble, so she has that medal equipped. But yeah, the Wasp King was really not very special. Status Mirror was nice here because of burn damage being applied back to him, but otherwise, it was just a bunch of super blocks, which for V especially would be very important. You know how it is when you die to basically anything. But the Everlasting King. This fight was fun, though at its core, it was just more of the same. It did take a while to win, a long while, but ultimately the truth is just that we can't lose. Our defenses are good, our damage output is good, the keys and tablet were a little bit awkward to fight against, but all the same, this Mimic's flattery will get him nowhere. And that's what happened to him. He stayed in that one spot going nowhere, in the middle of nowhere. With all that behind us now, let's ask the question. Can you beat Bug Fables the Everlasting Sapling with just the basics? You darn sure can. Now, I'm certain there are some of you here that are looking forward to seeing me try fighting teams Maki and Slacker, and maybe also Carmina. And you know, I could stop this video right here and leave you all hanging, but I'd rather not, because I love you a lot.
Now don't take that too serious.
So without further ado, let's go ahead and get this over with. Though first things first, we have to survive the Leaf Bug ambush in the far grasslands. Believe me when I say, this was arduous. But arduous is not impossible. With enough defense in Kabu, we're able to weather out the Fleet Bug's attacks, and Yin is finally able to fully mature. We're also given some items like Super Peppers and Iron Seeds, but we're not using them. They would just make this fight a little too easy, I think. And yeah, I just never used Super Peppers or Iron Seeds throughout this entire challenge. There's also still Carmina, and this is the reason I didn't really get to do this fight earlier in the challenge. You see, after you beat Carmina and Spike cards, you can't actually challenge Chuck until after you feed him a hearty breakfast from taking his trouble, which does mean you have to cook an item. And once again, I'm reminded of the Pebble Toss Only challenge, which will be coming out soon. But to hold you all over, I have a few challenges in Paper Mario to deal as well. To see what I mean? Well, stick around, and maybe subscribe so you don't miss the new videos when they come out. I mean, yeah, subscribing does nothing, but hey, the sooner I get to 1,000 subscribers, the better, right? Anyway, I did proceed to clown on literally every Spike Cards master and then become the champion myself in my own time. But first, we had to fight Carmina. And all I really did was just have Kabu in the front and have him keep attacking. At some point, I got poisoned, and safe to say, my poison attacker medals made this fight a lot faster. It seems that today, fate has dealt you a bad hand. But now, it's time for the main event. Team Mackie. Let me just throw this out there. It only makes sense to have Kabu be my main attacker here. Not only is he the least affected by enemy defense, but he also has the best longevity. And with these bosses and their damage potential, that's important. Really though, this fight was just more of the same. Just a little bit slower because of the massive defense and HP of Mackie and Kina. I wanted to beat Yin too, but the fact that Kabu can only target the foe that's directly in front of him made it complicated. And yeah, at some point I just decided, screw it, I don't care. But hey, it was fun while it lasted. But we're not quite done yet. There's still one more optional final boss for us to do, and that's Team Slacker. I was fully ready to have to deal with a bunch of Queen's Dinners and just a lot of other items that would cause me a lot of issues. But surprisingly, we didn't have to worry about that very much. And medals like Spiky Bot and Super Block Plus, Satis Mirror, and even Poison Touch did speed up the process quite a bit too. Some magic seeds did come into play, but they ultimately didn't really cause that much of an issue. It also helped that by now I have both of the Miracle Matter medals from fighting both Root Mother and the Everlasting King. Nothing else to say really, so before you go, why not check another one of my videos out? No matter your choice, thank you for watching.